program. A little bit of back history. The program is a cooperative event with Sinclair Community College located in Dayton, Ohio, and the American Institute of Building Design Dayton Regional Chapter. Sinclair Community College, I was looking up the other day, was actually established in 1887 as a private college. And then in 1965, it went public and has grown tremendously since. And it's been a valuable asset to the entire Dayton region. So I would like to thank Sinclair for opening their room up today and letting us address the students. I'd like to recognize and thank Chair Professor Amanda Romero and Professor of Design, Interior Design, Sherry Rethman, for the opportunity to address everybody and know what's going on here. I'd also like to welcome the students in the room and the attendees online. I believe you will find the program interesting, informative, and useful, and we will have questions and answers given as best we can. There are people online that are also being watched. They're watching and can comment. I need to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. So with that said, by participating in this meeting, you consent to being recorded and for the recording to be shared publicly. Please avoid sharing any personal or sensitive information that you wouldn't want publicly accessible. If you don't wish to be recorded or have comments included in the video, feel free to switch off your camera and participate via chat only. There is a chat box on the right side of the screen if anybody's online watching. Lastly, to create the best quality recording possible, please remember to mute yourself if you are not talking. It's surprising how sensitive some microphones are. If you happen to start talking and you forget to unmute, an automatic pop-up will remind you to turn your mic on. So with that, moving forward, I'd like to introduce Matthew Jones. He's an AIBD member and also a adjunct, I can't say that right, adjunct professor, faculty member here at Sinclair. Matthew, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks. Hello, everybody. How's everyone today? All right. Well, thanks for welcoming me in. Sherry, thanks for setting this up. As Mike was saying, we're doing sort of a dual thing today. So there are AIBD members who are joining us virtually through our wonderful internet here. And of course, I'm in the room with you guys right now. Some of you I recognize. Mark's in my kitchen and bath class, so thank you for coming out to this. I will do my best to pay attention online to the comments that are coming through. I'll try to catch those. People who are here in the classroom, put your hand up or interrupt me, whatever, as we're talking through the subject matter, and I'll try to get to you. I'll probably rattle on for 35, 45 minutes, something like that. I've done this presentation before. At the end, I'll make sure we have time for plenty of questions about what we see as far as the software goes or how we're using the software. So the plan today is I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to myself, tell you a little bit about what I do, right? Then I'm going to explain a little bit about how I do that with SketchUp and Layout, what I produce with those software programs. And then we're going to do sort of a case study of an ongoing project that I have that's happening currently. It's happening right now under construction here in the Dayton area. And like I said, at the end, we'll come back and we'll have plenty of time for all the questions that you might want to ask. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I am going to open up PowerPoint, and hopefully it'll work. Perfect. So hopefully everybody online can see this. Obviously everyone here can. All right, so first I want to introduce myself a little bit. Like I said, my name is Matthew Jones, and this doesn't want to work for me right now. There we go. All right, a few things about me. I am a adjunct faculty member here at Sinclair. I teach our kitchen and bath class, and I teach our 3D modeling course, which is the SketchUp course when that runs. I've taught a few other things in the past as well, but those seem to be the ones that I've sort of settled into. I'm also a professional residential designer for a company called Greater Dayton Building and Remodeling. It's a very large design build company here in the Dayton area that does everything from a small bathroom remodel to building a brand new house or renovating an entire house. I do some custom residential design on my own, working under the name of Jones Modern Design. So I do every once in a while, I'll do a custom house for a client. And I also teach a lot of people about SketchUp. Over the past few years, I've settled into this sort of side hustle where I go around and I help residential designers, interior designers, and architects learn how to use the SketchUp and Layout software, sometimes online, but more commonly if they're within the tri-state area, I actually go to their office and we sit down together and we often spend a weekend talking through how they can implement the software into their practice, right? So what do I do with SketchUp? It's really the basis of everything I produce graphically with my work. So I produce all sorts of things. I produce 3D renderings that look like this or like this. That's an aerial photo of the house that you were just seeing. I put together more simplified renderings like this. This was done for a builder in Columbus who wanted to come up with several designs that they could populate into a new suburban development. I'll do interior renderings. This is an interior of the house that you just saw. These are all created inside of SketchUp. These are all 3D models that once you're in SketchUp, you can spin around and go inside and take a look at. I create interior renderings, things like this that give an idea of the space that you might be creating or recreating inside of a structure. And I use it extensively for kitchen design and bathroom design. All the images, like I said, that you're seeing here are created within SketchUp. These particular ones happen to be of houses in the greater Dayton area where we have gone in and done extensive kitchen renovations. Same thing with bathroom renovations. All of this work being done inside of SketchUp. We also create presentation materials. So as you all know, there are multiple versions of graphic communication that you sort of need to get a mastery of in order to be an interior designer, a residential designer, an architect, right? Presentation materials definitely fall within that category, right? You're trying to explain your ideas, sort of sell your ideas to a client. SketchUp and Layout allow you to do that as well. So I often do these floor plan type presentation drawings where they might be presented digitally like we're doing now, or these might be printed out as a 48 by 48 inch image and then mounted on a piece of gator board for a client meeting. Now, SketchUp does a lot more than that. It's not just about putting together cool renderings and figuring out cool models that we can use to sort of show things off. SketchUp can be used for a lot of other things. The image you're seeing on your screen now, it doesn't look like some super pretty rendering of an interior, right? But this is actually a pretty cool thing you can do. What we're seeing in this image is, let me do this. This is a three-dimensional scan of an existing house. Okay, it was a house that was built in the early 2000s. I know it doesn't look much like a house because I only scanned the parts I needed, but somebody went into this house with a large modern iPad and they used the LiDAR style camera to scan what is the basement, the first floor, and the second floor, right? And I needed that because the client in this instance needed to install an elevator, right? It's very difficult to put an elevator in an existing house because you have to have, you know, multiple stops, right? You have to coordinate where that hoistway for the elevator is going to go. The big red thing in the middle is an elevator hoistway. I know what size that needs to be. So I was able to scan the house, which took 15 minutes, 20 minutes, go back to the office, draw the red block, which is the outline of an elevator shaft that I've used before, and then insert it into the house. So what does this tell me? It shows me where that pathway is going to go through that structure, so that when I go through to modify that, I know all the things that I'm getting into. It's shockingly easy to make a mistake between the basement, the first floor, and the second floor, and be off by 10 inches or 5 inches or something like that, and find yourself in a real pickle. So SketchUp works great for that. Structural design, it gets used for this quite a bit in the work that I do. So if you're going to build a big complicated structure, like this was a covered deck thing that I did a few years ago, how those pieces go together, it's really good to understand that, obviously, and it's really critical to be able to communicate that to the people who are actually going to do the work. So I'll go through it and I'll literally draw all of the structural members in some projects in order to coordinate with the people who are going to build it, so that we all get the same expected outcome at the end of the project. Another very common thing to do along the lines of structure would be a roof layout, a truss layout, or a rafter layout, right? So you might draw a really cool house like the one there on the left. It's a project I'm working on. If you want it to actually look like that, if you want the roof lines to all work out like that, Mike's smiling over here, you have to communicate that accurately to the people who are going to fabricate the parts that make the roof, right? So the roof might be made up of a whole bunch of trusses that are made in a factory somewhere. The more information that you can give to the people who are going to manufacture those things, the closer the final product is going to be to what you originally designed. So you're seeing two images there on your screen. One is the house. The other is just all of the framing members that create that roof. So all I did was pull those out and sit it next to it, so you could see that all would be contained inside the roof structure of that house. So very useful. It's a very useful tool to be able to design and then communicate your design when you're working on a project like that. And then, of course, the last thing that we need to do with any sort of design project in these fields is construction documents. So the drawings that you put together at the end that explain, here's what I want you to build, here's how I want you to build it. SketchUp and Layout will do all of those things for you. It'll let you create those awesome renderings. It'll let you do those interior renderings. You can look at the feasibility of a project, and then you can also go through and very intricately design and communicate how you need that to be built in order for your vision to be executed. So those are the things that I do with SketchUp. Okay, I do this on a daily basis, and those are the things that I use. Let me go back to this for everybody out there. Those are all the things, all the deliverables that I come up with using SketchUp and Layout, right? All those different pieces. So how does that work? In this room, do we have people who use SketchUp or Layout? Just one. I know, Mark, you do a little bit. So just a couple people. Okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. So Sherry, our professor for this class, was just explaining there are a few other people who don't happen to be in here, but do use SketchUp. I'm repeating that because the people online can't necessarily hear you guys out there. So there's 2 students in our class of 20 or so who use it, and a couple who are missing. All right, so I'm going to spend a few minutes explaining the basics of how SketchUp and Layout works. All right, let's go back to screen sharing here, and I am going to pull up a SketchUp file. All right, so I keep saying SketchUp. Sometimes I say Layout. Why do I do that? SketchUp and Layout are 2 computer programs that work together, right? They work together to do all the things that I just showed you. For the people here who were AutoCAD users at some point, SketchUp is very like model space. In the SketchUp program, you draw very specifically whatever it is that you're trying to draw. So you'll draw full size, whatever it is. If you're going to draw a couch, it's going to be you know, 6.5 feet long inside of SketchUp. So there's no scale inside of SketchUp. It's completely three-dimensional. The software looks like this when you open it up, and you can customize your sort of interface to make it how you want. But basically, you're just looking at blank 3D space. It gives you all sorts of tools to be able to draw. So I'm just going to draw a two-dimensional square. I'm going to extrude it and make it look like something different. I might want to make it look like a weird towery house thingy like that. I might want to make my weird towery house, I don't know, I'm going to make it gray, and then I'm going to put a funky window in it. And then maybe I'm going to draw some ground around it, and I might put some grass in that space as well. So that's SketchUp. SketchUp is a program that allows you to literally draw whatever you want. It varies from other three-dimensional drawing programs like Revit or Chief Architect, in the sense that you're creating everything natively. If you're building a house in this program, you're not creating like a wall type or something like that, and then creating a path for that wall type, which is how some of those other programs work. You're literally drawing the whole thing yourself inside of SketchUp, okay? So that gives you an incredible amount of flexibility with your creativity, but it challenges you to completely understand the thing that you're going to build. That's very appealing to me, in the sense that the software is not helping me with the design. The software is just there to allow me to communicate my ideas. So that is the SketchUp side. We also have the layout side. The layout side is like Paperspace for people who have used things like AutoCAD, right? Paperspace, it does what it sounds like. It's the paper that you're eventually theoretically printing out to show your idea. So what you do with Paperspace is you are importing your SketchUp file into Paperspace, and then it allows you to do things like annotations. So for example, I could put notes here. Right? I can dimension, I can do all those different things. So you're always working in two different programs. You're always working in SketchUp to do the modeling, and you're working in Layout to do essentially the presentation or the finished drawing of whatever the project is that you're trying to communicate. Does that make sense to everyone before I sort of move on? Okay, like I said, feel free to interrupt if there are questions here. And I am going to check down here in our chat box. Looks like somebody uses Chief Architect, which is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with Chief Architect at all. All right, so I'm going to jump into, like I said, a little bit of a case study to talk about how I use these two programs in my professional practice, okay? So to give that a little bit of context, what I do for Greater Dayton in building and remodeling is I'm a residential designer who handles the renovation projects for our design build department. So what that means is there's not a separate design company creating a set of drawings, then it's being taken to a construction company to provide like a bid, right, an estimate for that project. The company I work for does both of those things. That's not incredibly uncommon, you know, it's not crazy to do it that way, but it's also not terribly normal. The advantage of that is your client is working with one sort of provider for both of those things, and it seems a little bit more collaborative when you're doing it that way. Why is that important? It's important for a couple of reasons, but the biggest reason I've found over the past 15 or 20 years is that it allows you to deliver more of what a person wants, what a client wants, for the budget that they have in mind, right? Because as you're working through a design to get to something that you can build, you're also paying attention to, hey, are we actually going to write the check to do this thing in the end? as opposed to creating a giant design and then just finding out later that it either fits your budget or doesn't fit your budget, which of course would be a bummer, right? So typical workflow for me, phone rings. Hey, Mr. Matt, can you come out and talk to me about a project? Yes, Mrs. Smith, I'll come down and talk to you about the project. And that's where our story is going to start with this project. So in 2021 or 2020, yeah, 2022 is where this project started. I get that phone call and I go to meet with this family. It's two physicians, which is always a good sign because they have some money, right? With 4 little children. So they're 2 people, 2 very intelligent, determined people, 4 little kids. They want to move out into the country. They want to build like the house that they're going to be in for years to raise their kids. And they're working on that process. They have found a property that already has a house on it, sits on 10 acres, already has a swimming pool, but it has a relatively small house from the 1990s, kind of a builder grade house, you might say, that looks like this. So it's kind of like wah wah wah, right? It's not particularly exciting. This doesn't get anybody excited about their forever home, right? But like I said, it's on 10 beautiful acres of land. There's already a swimming pool installed. It's in a great school system for their 4 little kids. But they want a much bigger house and they want a much more modern house, right? So they asked me about that, and what do I say? I spend an hour and a half with them. I find out that they want to have 4 or 5 bedrooms, whereas the current house only has 3. I find out that the house is sitting on a slab, so there's no basement. They would really like to have some sort of basement space, both for storage, recreation, but also for safety if you're out in the country and there's a tornado, that type of thing. They want a big garage, and they want a big garage that is big enough to accommodate multiple cars, a woodworking space for one of the partners, and they want it to be big enough that their 4 little boys can run around inside in the winter. So it almost becomes like another play space. And the final piece they want, I should mention, is they're big gardeners, and they have all of these plants, like succulent and tropical plants that they bring in and out, right? So they want a space that will serve sort of like a sunroom greenhouse type thing. Not all the way to the greenhouse. They don't want to go quite that far. But they want to plan for that with what their new design is going to be. So hour and a half conversation, then they turn to me and say, okay, what's that going to cost? And what am I supposed to say? I could say $3 million and I'm going to be safe, right? And they're going to say, I'm going to call somebody else. I could say $500,000 and then I could get fired in 6 months when we can't do it for $500,000, right? But as a design build company, when we have a client that feels pretty qualified, we will actually take a few design steps before we commit to what it's going to cost or charge them any money. And this is where SketchUp really starts to shine, because we can get some hard information relatively quickly by using SketchUp and Layout. So here's what I start with. I've got this picture, right? Everybody sees the house that looks so lovely. Also, in that, in that meeting, I'm able to take a photograph. I think this is upside down. I'm able to take a photograph of the original drawings of the house because the previous homeowner had left them there, right? So I have a hand-drawn plan of the first floor of the house. The homeowner was able to send to me a JPEG image that they had gotten from somebody of the original elevation of the front of the house, right? These are the things they're sending to me. So I go back to my office. I've got some images on my phone that I can upload to my computer, and I've got the context of the conversation I just had with these folks. And I want to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours putting together some materials of what I think this project could be, so I can communicate those ideas to the client so they have an expectation of what they might get from me. And I can communicate those ideas to a series of trade partners, like people who will put in a foundation or extend a plumbing system or do the grading, right? All the people who can give me costs, right? So I need to put together quickly a little bit of information on paper that I can share with those two different groups so that I can explain the vision that I'm trying to give to the client, and I can get a relatively close budget range from the people who are literally going to do the work. And we're going to see how SketchUp lets me do that with these few pieces of information that I have here. So what do I do? The first thing I did was, let me pull this up here. First thing I did, we'll go to this one. This is just that random file I started with. The first thing I'm going to do is SketchUp will allow me to bring in images. So I'm going to import this image, the one I just showed you. I took this with an iPhone or something, and I just brought it into SketchUp. Now I have literally just a picture of something inside of SketchUp. It's a picture of that floor plan. Looking at this, I'm going to do a couple things to do it to allow me to work with it a little bit better. The first thing I'm going to do is turn it over so that it makes sense in my head. This is the front of the house. That's how I would have been looking at it. The next thing I want to do is figure out how I can use this as a basis for a preliminary sketch of a design that I want to do for it. So remember how I said everything inside of the SketchUp space is full size, right? A foot is a foot, 10 feet is 10 feet. If I want to be able to work with that, I have to make sure what I have in there currently is the correct size. So one of the nice things about working with old plans is there are dimensions on them, of course. If I zoom in, just making sure everybody can see that. If I zoom in, I can measure and I can see that says 5'6". What SketchUp is saying is that it's 23 inches and 5/8, right? Obviously that doesn't work. I'm going to change that. So what I'm going to do, all inside of SketchUp, is I am going to scale my image. So I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to measure it again. It's going to say 23 inches. And I'm going to say it is 66.5 inches, which is 5'6.5". SketchUp's going to resize the model for me. What does that mean? It looks exactly the same, except if I go measure something, I'm going to measure from here to here, and we have roughly 10'9", 129 inches. That's saying 130. That's close enough for what I'm doing right now. Okay, so now inside of SketchUp, I have a full-size floor plan image of the first floor of this house. So if this was out in reality, this drawing would be like 60 feet long, right? It's kind of cool when you think about it. How is that useful? Well, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it and decide if it looks flat enough for me to use as the basis for a drawing. What do I mean by flat enough? Somebody folded this drawing up at some point. You can see it was folded up and put into like a 5x11 folder or something, right? What does that mean? That means when I unfolded it wherever it was, on their kitchen table probably, it's doing this, right? It's not sitting there flat. So I bet if I draw a straight line across this, it's not going to be a straight line. Yeah, can everyone see? Let me see if I can highlight it. Everyone see my blue line there? It starts on the outside of the house over here, and it's on the inside of the house on this side. That's not great for what I'm trying to do here, because I'm trying to use this as a basis for a sketch. So before I do anything else, I'm going to straighten out my image. And what I'm going to do is use that blue line that I just drew as a straight, flat, level line, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to twist my image. So I'm going to go back over. The line I drew wants to be this line, but it's actually down here. I'm just going to twist my drawing down. Now let me highlight my line again. Now my line is straight with the house, right? And all these things are relative. Keep in mind, this is very much like taking a roll of trace paper and throwing it over the top of a drawing and sketching something out real quick. Mike, I'm sure you've done that a million times, right? Yeah. He did it just yesterday, right? So this is the version of doing that with a computer. So what do I want to do next? So By the way, I'm not going to do the entire design for this house in this presentation. I just want to show you how we can get started quickly. Okay. So what's the next thing I might want to do with this? Well, this does not look like something that I really want to present to somebody yet, and I haven't designed anything new. SketchUp allows you to do a couple of cool things really quick with an image like this. SketchUp will let you take an image and explode it. Okay, so what's that mean? It's all pixelated now, right? That means what I have is essentially a face that has the JPEG information on it, the image information, and it has a bunch of lines around it. That's cool because what I could do now is I can get rid of parts of the image that I don't want to have. 10 years ago, I was doing this stuff. I had to take this into Photoshop or GIMP or something like that and do this. SketchUp does this natively now. So what I'm going to do, I am going to draw some rectangles or squares around parts of the house that stick out that I want to see. There's a weird window thing here. There's a chimney thing here. And there's a garage over here. Pretty simple house. Okay. I just want the part that's not pixelated. So I'm going to literally erase everything else. All right, that looks a lot better, doesn't it already? Okay, so that's giving me an image that I can work with. Now, this particular client, what did they want to do? They wanted to add on to this house, right? They want more family living space. They want a better kitchen. They want that glass room / plant room space, and they want a big garage storage workshop type element. I have the basis of the existing house here. I need to figure out how to design those particular things. There's a lot of things that go into adding onto a house, and we're not going to get into, is there room for zoning? We're not going to get into, is the septic system in the way? We're going to pretend like all those things don't exist for this discussion, and we're just going to work with what cool stuff can I do to this house, okay? So looking at this plan, I'm thinking I want to add on to this house. I'm thinking I don't want to go this way for some variety of reasons, or this way, and I don't want to go out to the front, so I'm going to go this direction. And I think what I'm going to do is take over that garage. I'm going to make that garage part of the new living space, and I'm going to build out from there to do the other things that I want. Okay, so I'm going to just say to myself, this is going to become new space. And I'm going to say that is the beginnings of a family room. That garage is probably 21 or 22 feet across and 22 to 24 feet deep, right? That's a nice size room. I think I might want it to be a little bit bigger though. So I am going to make that room even a little bit bigger. I'm going to add 10 more feet to it. So now maybe I have 30 feet of space. And I'm going to call that my family room. Now keep in mind, I am just blocking things out right now. This is a lot like doing a little bit of a fancier bubble diagram. And of course, I've designed this already, so it's easier for me, right? The next thing I'm gonna think about is I need this big garage thing. I have to put it somewhere, and I want a glass type room for the plants. Where's that gonna go? Like I said, I've designed this already, so I didn't come up with it this quickly. But I'm gonna put the glass room between my family room and my garage to create some sort of like separation. Okay, so I think my glass room is going to go somewhere over here, and I'm just going to make up some dimensions, and I'm going to call that my glass room. And then the last piece I need is my big garage. So I'm going to start drawing in some shapes that give me my big garage. Don't need that. And we'll go a little further. All right. I'm going to call that my garage. Okay, so all I'm doing in this exercise, and I mean, we're doing this in real time right now. So what is this, like 15 minutes we've been talking about this project so far? All we're doing is blocking out where those things are going to go and roughly how big those things are going to be. Why is that important? One, it has to fit where you're building it. And two, from the design build perspective, you know, of the person who doesn't have this job yet, I'm trying to figure out roughly how big is this thing, so I can figure out roughly how much it's going to cost, so I can have an honest conversation with that client about here's what I'm building for how much money. Okay, so I'm going to expand this idea a little bit more, but you saw what I did there. I took the original plan image that I had and I just added on to it to create the very basic floor plan of a new space. I'm going to pull up another file here, and this file is just like I have been working on that a little bit longer. Okay, so this is like 30 or 40 minutes later in the day. So I'm not going to bore you with drawing all these little pieces and parts out, but all I've done is flush out that floor plan with general dimensions that I know are going to work for things like a powder room or a kitchen. And I still have that overlaid on top of my original plan image, right? So I've still started from the same place. So we have our garage, we have our workshop, we have our glass room with a bunch of windows, we have our family room space, which is going to have a little mud type entry and a powder room. We've incorporated some laundry space. And then we've also gone in and we've redesigned a lot of the first floor of the existing house. What was there before? Let's see. They had this weird U-shaped kitchen thing and a closed off dining room. Nobody liked that. We went through and did a bunch of changes to it, right? So the design, not super important to what this discussion's about, but the utility of how you get to that very quickly is important. So if I was sitting in my office and not talking at the same time I was doing this, we're probably 45 minutes into this exercise to get to this point. I'm going to call that pretty good on my floor plan. I think I could show somebody that. I can do the same thing with an elevation, right? So all I'm doing here is I'm taking that image that the homeowner was able to share with me. It was a picture that a black and white picture that they had of the original front elevation of the house from the plans when the house was built. Yeah, go ahead. So not in here. So the question was, did I use section lines, which is a tool inside of SketchUp to get to this? The answer is no. This is completely two-dimensional right now. So if you look at this, I'll rotate it. There's nothing there other than the two dimensions. But I'll show you how those work in a few minutes. So I did the same thing to get to this image. I took that image that the homeowner had shared with me. I brought it into SketchUp. I exploded it. I cut out the parts I didn't want. And then I turned on actually my plan drawing below it. And just like if I was doing an elevation old school, I just drew lines straight up, right? And then I manipulated the heights of things to make them look like I wanted them to look until I got to this look. Okay, so I've got my original house. I've got where the garage used to be with another 10 feet added to it, a two-story addition that has all those things in it, has some second floor space, which I haven't thought about yet, but it's going to be bedrooms, right? I have some sort of room with a lot of windows. Probably should put some skylights in there now that I'm looking at it. And then I have my big garage piece, right? So that guy, that's probably another 10 minutes after I've got the floor plan drawn out, okay? So I've got a lot of information now, and I can take all this information that's living inside of SketchUp, and I can import it into Layout. So I'm not going to do that live because I don't want to spend the couple minutes it takes to do that. But all I did was import this into SketchUp or into Layout, excuse me, and then set it to a scale I wanted, which is 1/4 inch scale for a 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. And now I have a very rough drawing of where I want to go. I can add all sorts of labels or notes. You can see there's some dimensions on here. If I was going to do this in reality at this point, I'd probably put a lot more dimensions on there. Let's say that takes another 10 or 15 minutes. I'll do another page that, there we go, that has our front elevation in it. All right, so now we're maybe an hour and a half into this. It's coffee break time, but I can save this as a PDF file, and I can send it to my lumber guy. I can send it to the foundation guy. I can send it to a whole series of trade partners who are going to be involved in what this thing's going to cost. And then they're going to call me and say, hey, you didn't give me enough information. I'm going to say, well, let's have a conversation on the phone. And we're going to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes talking about what my expectation is for what they're going to do, right? And then they're going to give me a ballpark number, right? And then I'm going to take my ballpark numbers and add them up. I'm going to take that same PDF file that I created with SketchUp and Layout, and I'm going to meet with that client and say, I worked it out. It's $850,000 is how much it's going to cost, right? And I'm just making up numbers here. I got all that done in the course of, I don't know, the drawings were 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. The phone calls are probably another 2 hours over the course of a couple of days, no doubt. And then I'm back talking to that client, having only spent 4, 5, 6 hours of my, billable time at work to get to a relatively close cost for the project, right? So SketchUp and Layout, I mean, it excels in doing something quick like that, right? Any questions so far? We're going to jump into the next part of figuring this out.
Check the,
Sure. We can check.
answer the question.
Yeah. See if anybody's in here. Nope, no questions yet. If there are questions, though, feel free to interrupt, both here in person or online. I'm trying to watch down here. Okay, so let's continue our story here. Homeowner thinks I'm a design genius. They love what I put together, right? Like that never happens, honestly, but let's pretend like that happened. They love my design. They're like, Matt, that looks awesome. Now I'm going to pay you money to finish the design and drill down on the details and figure out what this thing is going to cost. Fantastic. That's the result I want to get from. I will repeat the questions, Ted. Sorry if we missed one. So now we're going to take the next step, and now we're going to go slower with our approach to this project, right? Because now it's a client that is investing in us, paying us to work on the project. So I'm going to take that preliminary design, and I'm just going to sort of shelve it. And I'm going to go to the house. I'm either going to scan it, like I described before with an iPad, or I'm going to take a tape measure, and I'm actually going to measure what's there, right? Because who knows how closely correlated that house is to that drawing that I got in that meeting, right? They could be wrong by 2 feet. I mean, it could be all sorts of craziness. So now that they're paying us for our time, we're going to invest in figuring out much more specifically, the true layout of the existing conditions of that house. That's going to allow us to draw all that out in, back to this, draw all that out and start building a 3-dimensional model inside of SketchUp. Okay, let's see here. This is not the one I want. Let's go here. Okay, so we'll go measure the whole thing. Then we'll draw the whole thing out in 2 dimensions like I did really quickly, except we're going to do it much more accurately this time. And then we're going to build in 3 dimensions a model to show us what's currently there. And we're going to do that just the same way that I did when we started talking about SketchUp. So I'm just going to make up some dimensions, but I'm going to say the house is 32 feet, and I'm going to say it is 34 feet this way, and I'm going to go 32 feet again, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to be basing this off the measurements I took in the field. I'm going to create my walls, and obviously I'm just sort of making this up, but I'm going to go through a process like this that allows me to create a series of what I am thinking of as 2-dimensional walls. So pretend that looks like the floor plan of the house, right? Obviously it doesn't. I'm doing this quickly. But I'm going to take that 2-dimensional floor plan and I am going to extrude it. I'm just going to grow it to be the first floor of the house. So I've measured the first floor of the house. It has an 8-foot ceiling. I could go with 8 feet. I could try to be more precise and draw to the framing. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'm just going to say it is 8 feet. I'm going to go 96, and I'm going to say I have my first floor walls. I know this doesn't look like the house, really, bear with me. So those are my first floor walls, right? So you can pretend like the kitchen's back here. Now, That's just the first floor walls. There's a second floor. I need a second floor. So I am going to draw my second floor real quick. And I had some of the original drawings. I saw in the drawings that there were 2x10 joists over the first floor. So I happen to know that those are 9¼ tall, and it's got some subfloor on it. So it's going to be in the neighborhood of 10 inches plus drywall. So I'm going to draw my floor at 10 inches. And then there's a second floor above. It's very similar to the first floor. So I'm just going to copy my first floor and put it up there. It is a little bit different. If you remember the image, the second floor sat back a little bit. I know from my measurements it was 4 feet, so I'm going to move that back 48 inches. Clearly it doesn't hang over the back, so I'm going to fix that by pulling this direction, and I'm just going to continue doing that. I'll draw the roof, I'll draw what I know about the foundation. I'm going to draw in 2D very quickly and then extrude in 3D just as quickly to get to a full 3-dimensional model that is going to look like this. Oops, it's going to look like this. It looks like the existing house. Now, obviously, that's not going to take 2 hours. Like, this could take somebody all day to accurately do that. But remember, at this point, we're getting paid for this work, right? We're not doing this on a whim anymore. They've hired us to do this design work. So quite honestly, to get to that fully drawn house, that is probably a full day's work for somebody, you know, somewhere between 6 and 8 hours of work. That lets us know what's there and what we want to change about the house, right? So we're going to move to the things that we change. Let me go back and make sure no one's asking questions here. Looks like we're good still. Sure, go ahead. Sure. So the question, I'm going to repeat this for the people online. The question do I typically draw everything using tools like the rectangle tool, or do I use the 3D warehouse, which is a way that you can share SketchUp files online? So if I'm drawing the walls, the roof, the foundation of a house, I'm typically just drawing the whole thing inside of SketchUp. If I want to find something like an appliance, I will get online. I will go to the 3D warehouse and I'll download a 3D model of a wolf range or something like that, right? And I'll show you a little bit more about that when we get to the inside of this house. Okay, so I've got the house that exists. I remember from my very early schematic work what I want to build, right? So I know what I need to change about this. And what I need to change primarily is I'm going to get rid of the existing garage and I'm going to add all that other stuff. So, of course, I've already gone through and drawn all this, so I'm not going to draw it for us all again. But I am going to turn off my garage and I am going to turn on everything new. So to get to this, all I did was the same process. I knew the new floor plan I wanted to have, right? I knew I'd worked out those measurements based off the existing conditions of the house. I drew quick 2-dimensional plans and I just extruded them to build my 3-dimensional model. Now that gets a little tricky. Do you remember how I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion about figuring out things that have to do with structure and shape? I will often do that inside of the SketchUp software. Well, I completely do that when I'm working on a building like this, right? Because it's very important to me that my roof lines look right, that the heights of those where they intersect with the other roof lines all make sense. So I will build into my model a lot of those structural elements before I start making it look pretty like this. So I have that saved. So I'm going to sort of slightly go back in time, and I'm going to call this my structural model. So this is the same model. I just haven't put all the fancy stuff on the outside yet. What I used this model to do was figure out how am I literally going to do a lot of these things. It's not super easy to add a basement next to a house that already exists, right? Because when you dig next to a house, you dig next to the foundation. That foundation wall wants to be undermined. It wants to fall over. All sorts of bad things happen. It's not super easy to add onto a house and make sure everything lines up. It seems like it should be easy, but in reality, it's not. So I almost always use SketchUp to plan out those steps in my mind. So on our screen right now, that's sort of the plain Jane version of where I want to end up. But in order to get to that, I'm going to start with as if I'm building it. So the first thing I'm going to build is going to be my foundation. So I'm going to draw in SketchUp the existing foundation, which would be stuff over here. And believe it or not, this house, somebody might have noticed, doesn't have footings under it. It just has 8-inch walls that go down and sit in the dirt. Crazy. And I'm going to draw on the other side all of the new pieces that I'm going to add. So I'm going to add a little bit of basement, which is the deep part there. I am going to add a new garage foundation and sloped slab for drainage. And I ended up deciding to put a little crawl space next to my existing foundation to minimize my digging next to that foundation. This isn't structural design class, this is SketchUp class, but just explaining what we've got going. So those are the parts that I'm going to work through, and I'm going to work through that in SketchUp. And another key element to working through this in SketchUp is I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know to call. So when I'm working on this, it's not unusual for me to call like my excavator or another project manager that I might know and get on a Zoom call and pull up the SketchUp model and say, hey, John, I'm trying to do this. What's your advice? What's the best way to do it? And I'll show them this, which is much easier than trying to talk that through, right, without having that drawing. And sometimes I'll even change it in the moment. And then I'm going to continue building my house. And I'm going to literally be building this like I'm building the house. So I've dug a hole. I've put my foundation in next to the house. And I'm going to start adding the next things I need. So over my basement, of course, I'm going to have some sort of framing for a wood floor, right? There has to be something there for you to walk on. So I'm going to use SketchUp to draw out that framing system. And then I'm going to send that, I'm going to have the ability to send that to the people who are going to do the work, and I'm going to get their input. Like, is this a good way to do this? This is a little unusual, actually, for people who do much building. These, the joists are actually hung off the mud sill in this arrangement, which is a little bit unusual. Well, we made that decision because we were looking at this model, and this part was getting higher and higher and higher. And those 14-inch floor joists, if I can drop them down, I can get a lot closer to the roof line that I want to have, which looks like that, as opposed to another 1.5 feet or so high, right? So SketchUp allowed us to figure that out. All right, I've got my floor system figured out. Then I have to build my second floor wall. So I go ahead and build my walls, or I add back in the walls that are already there. Not too complicated, but what this allows me to do is figure out my plate heights. What are plate heights? When you build, okay, thanks. So when you build your walls, right, they're going to be a certain height. You don't randomly build them at heights. They're not all 8 feet tall. They're not all 9 feet tall. You can adjust that once again to make things work out. So I'm going to build my walls in SketchUp to figure out how things work out, right? And then I'm going to add on top of that the next framing system I need. So once again, I need floor framing for the second floor. So I'm going to add whatever type of framing system I want for that second floor, right? And that could be whatever you want. But all the way through with this, I am working with and communicating with the people who are going to both build and supply the parts for this to make sure I'm not missing something. All the way through to the roof trusses, the rafters, and everything like that, including any component of that building. So any structural part, any cladding part, all the different pieces. Now I'm going to hurry up a little because I can go on and on forever, but we're going to talk a little bit about the inside of this design as well, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Okay, so we've got the whole structure put together. We're going to talk about figuring out the inside and how SketchUp lets us do that. So this is our semi-finished model. Everything's done in 3 dimensions. We've added in the bathrooms, the kitchen, and SketchUp allows us to see inside and demonstrate to our clients and demonstrate to the people who are going to build it all those different components. I think kitchens are a great example of this. We can go in and see very clearly what that kitchen is going to look like, because It exists full scale inside of SketchUp. Every single piece does, right? This range hood exists, this cabinet exists. This is a great example of a piece that I might download from that 3D warehouse. The 3D warehouse is just a place online where you can go and download models that other people have created. Okay, it's not unusual for me when I'm working through a project like this to help people with furniture. So now I've gone to the second floor, which is significantly smaller, and we're inserting furniture into our layouts so that people can see how those spaces are actually going to work, right? We're not just putting rectangles on paper and saying it's a bedroom. We're going to draw into it the right size and scale of furniture for those spaces. And we'll just keep working it through until eventually we get to something that looks like a finished model where we have drawn inside of SketchUp every piece of that project that we need. And there's two more things that we're going to do that always come up. The homeowner's always going to say, well, I want the house to be blue, not white, right? SketchUp does that perfectly well. I do this all the time with people. We will go through and we will explore different ways that this house could look. I will often do this in the moment on a TV screen at my office. So I have a screen that's, well, not as big as our projector here, but a big screen. We'll do this in the moment. We'll go in and say, well, what if the house is blue, light blue with white trim? I don't know if I like that. What if there's a lot more white? Oh, we don't know if we like that. What if it's dark blue? Absolutely hate that. You know, and we'll just keep, oh, what if it's black? That looks very modern, right? And we'll just work our way through until we find the one that we like. This is what this house is going to roughly look like in the end. It's going to be these colors with that color of roofing, a color of wood trim, all those different pieces. So we're going to be able to do that. And then the very last piece that we're going to put together is the all important documentation of how this thing is actually built. So remember how I did that with the sketch version? Same process. Inside of SketchUp, I am going to go through and set up the things that I want to see. I do that by setting up these things at the top called scenes. So I set up a scene that shows me just the floor plan. And then I'm going to go over into layout and I'm going to bring that into layout. And I will have as many of those scenes or images as I want to convey information. I'm going to go through and annotate it, and I'm going to end up with something that looks like a full set of construction documents. So this is that project saved as a PDF file, and it's loading slowly. Here we go. We'll have floor plans for both floors. We'll have, oh, this is an interior elevation file, but so we'll have all the interior elevations. You'll have the roof plan, you'll have all the building sections, you'll have all the cabinetry plans, you'll have the foundation plans. Any piece of information that you need to pull out of that model, you can pull out of that model and put into your layout file. All the details of how you want things built, electrical plans. The world is your oyster as far as the amount of information you want to pull out of that model and share with the team who's going to build it. All right, so I've gone on, and Mike has told me I've talked for too long. That's a habit of mine. So I am going to go back here and go back to this. All right. Questions about anything that I've been up to with SketchUp or how that process works from anybody? Go ahead. Mark, go ahead.
Sure. Just real quick, in terms of your total SketchUp workflow,
Yeah.
You mentioned scanning with an iPad. Is that using SketchUp on an iPad to do that, or is that a separate program?
Sure. So the question is about scanning. Is that done in SketchUp on the iPad, or is that a separate program? It is a separate program. The most popular one is Canvas, I think, and they will scan what's called a point cloud, which is a way to scan three-dimensional information, and then they can actually send you the SketchUp file, right? So what you do is you have an app on an iPad, you scan it, you upload it. Usually by the time I've driven back to my office, they have delivered to me the SketchUp file. that I can work with.
And then I have one more question related to workflow. You showed a bunch of renderings early on.
Mm-hmm.
Are those completely created in SketchUp, or are those exported to either Illustrator or some other program, or even to a rendering software?
Sure. So the question was the images that I looked at, or that I shared at the very beginning, and I can go back to some of those. Let's see. So that's stuff that looks like, so this would be all SketchUp. This would be all SketchUp, all SketchUp, all SketchUp. Really the only thing that I occasionally will do, there's an example in here. So that lens flare that you see there, the orange thing that looks like the sun's coming through the window, sometimes SketchUp won't do that. Sometimes I'll, for some reason, want to do that, and I'll do that in Photoshop. But everything else that you've seen other than the lens flare, that's completely done with native SketchUp tools.
So I use SketchUp on iPad and I also use it on my PC. And they're a little different. I've gotten used to the iPad version, but I wanted to know like the section. Like when I use my PC and I go to look at like, the floor plan on top, it usually lines up perfectly on the PC. But on my iPad, it's like I'll go to like the top view and it's just still showing me like a perspective.
Okay.
So I was wondering how to just get a flat view floor plan on iPad.
Okay, so the question for people who can't hear that, she uses SketchUp on an iPad and on a PC, and she's trying to get the, when she uses a section cut, how to get that to look as if it's in parallel projection, not in perspective. Both SketchUp on a PC and on a iPad, they have a setting that just says parallel or perspective. So you just have to make sure it's set to parallel, and then you have to make sure that that view for the camera is aligned. So it's the same setting, but it's in different places because one's a Mac product and one's a PC product. Yeah.
That window reflection, the material that you use, did you download that from the warehouse?
Oh, the image we were just looking at?
When you did go to the window at first, like the material for the window,
oh,
reflection.
Sure. No, that's native to SketchUp. So the question was, when I was quickly drawing that weird looking house that was really tall with a big window in it, all of the textures that you saw in there, those are native to SketchUp. So they're in SketchUp when you open it up. There are ways that you can bring in any texture you want to SketchUp. So you can, any image that you can find of anything, you can make it a SketchUp texture, like a picture of bricks or a picture of grass or whatever. You can make that a texture, but it comes with I don't know, a couple hundred textures already natively inside of it. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I think we're kind of we're timed out with AIBD, I think. So Mike's going to come up, but students, I'll be around for a while, and I can chat more. Sure.
Thank you, Matt. Everybody that's online, thank you for attending today. Everybody in the room, we've got as much time as we need or you need to ask more questions about what SketchUp is, about the design process. I know that more of this is interior design, but I think you can tell by what Matt has shown so far, the sky's the limit with the SketchUp. I used SketchUp myself about 10 years ago until my computer crashed, but it wasn't as detailed and the options was not available as it is today. I did whole little cities with little scaled models, and I could turn them around just like this and pick finishes, but nowhere near what this is. Again, thank you everybody for attending online, and hope to see you at our next presentation. And so at that point, I think we're signing off. Have a good day.